Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good people, good people. Oh, I'm back. I caught it. Oh man, I got good reflexes over here. My phone almost fell. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good people. My name is Martin Imoragewa Mureidi, and today I'm coming to you live on Twitter. What's up? And recorded on the other platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever place you're watching me from. I hope I catch you in the right opportune moment. I hope you're doing well. And if you're not, I hope you feel well after watching this video. Um, today I'm messing up. I'm messing up. I'm messing up. Anyway, bam, bam. Let me check. 1, 2. Okay. We're back. We're back online over here. Anyway, I'll be telling a story of a gentleman called James Blunt, and it comes from the laws of human nature. Oh, good people, I have good news today. Today's the, oh, by the way, Happy New Year. Today is the 31st. Right now, I'm recording this. It is 5:58 Mountain Time, and I still have about 6 more hours. Happy New Year. Hope 2020 is doing good before I catch up to it. Otherwise, oh yeah, I bought this book today. I decided to end the year on a high note, so I bought this book today. I I think it's the best purchase I've made this year. You know, like better late than never. So uh, it comes from chapter 6 of this book. It's the chapter is titled "Elevate Your Perspective," and then he goes on to talk about the law of short-sightedness. The law of short-sightedness is: it is in the animal part of your nature to be most impressed by what you can see and hear in the present. The latest news reports and trends, the opinions and actions of the people around you, whatever seems the most dramatic. This is what makes you fall for alluring schemes that promise quick results and easy money. This is also what makes you overreact to present circumstances, becoming overly exhilarated or panicky as events turn one direction or the other. Learn to measure people by the narrowness or breadth of their vision. Avoid entangling yourself with those who cannot see the consequences of their actions, who are in a continual reactive mode. They will infect you with this energy. You must be on the larger trends that govern events. Oh, your eyes must be on the larger trends that govern events, on that which is not immediately visible. Never lose sight of your long-term goals. With an evaluated perspective, you will have the patience and clarity to reach almost any objective. That is the law of short-sightedness. And then now I will narrate to you the story of James Blunt. All through the summer and early fall of 1719, the Englishman John Blunt, born 1665, died 1733, one of the lead directors of the South Sea Company, followed the latest news from Paris with increasing anxiety. The French were in the midst of a spectacular economic boom, fueled primarily by the success of the Mississippi Company, an enterprise started by the expatriate Scotsman John Law to exploit the riches in the Louisiana territories controlled by the French. Law sold shares in the company, and as its price kept rising, Frenchmen of all classes were cashing out and becoming fabulously wealthy. The word millionaire itself was coined in these months to refer to such nouveau riches. Such news made Blunt angry and envious. He was a loyal Englishman. With the success of the Mississippi Company, Paris was drawing in investment capital from all over Europe. If this continued, France would soon become the finance capital of the world, surpassing Amsterdam and London. Such newfound power for the French could only spell disaster for England, its arch enemy, particularly if another war broke out between them. More personally, Blunt was a man of great ambition. He was the son of a humble shoemaker. From early on in his life, he aimed to ascend to the highest levels of English society. His means of getting there, he believed, would be through the financial revolution sweeping Europe, which centered on the increasing popularity of joint stock corporations like Law's and like the South Sea Company. As opposed to building wealth through the traditional means of owning land, which was expensive to manage and highly taxable, it was relatively easy to earn money through purchasing stock, and profits were tax-free. Such investments were all the rage in London. Blunt had plans to turn the South Sea Company into the biggest and most prosperous joint stock company in Europe. But John Law had stolen his thunder with a bold venture, and with the full backing of the French company, of the French government. Blunt would simply have to come up with something bigger and better for his sake and for the future of England. The South Sea Company had been formed in 1710 as an enterprise that would handle and manage parts of the English government's enormous debts, in exchange for which the company was to be granted a monopoly on all English trade with South America. Over the years, the company did almost no trading, but served as an informal bank for the government. Through his leadership of the company, Blunt had forged relationships with the wealthiest and most powerful Englishmen, most notably King George I, born 1660, died 1727. Himself, who became one of its biggest investors and was named governor of the company. Blunt's motto in life had always been think big, and it had served him well. And so, as he racked his brain for a way to outdo the French, he finally hit upon a scheme in October 1719 that was worthy of his motto, and that he felt certain would change the course of history. The greatest problem facing the English government, headed by the king, was the massive debts it had incurred over the course of 30 years during the wars that had been fought with France and Spain, all financed through borrowing. Blunt's proposal was simple and quite astounding. The South Sea Company would pay the government a nice fee in order to take over the debt, valued at a whopping £31 million. The company would receive in exchange an annual interest payment on the debt. The company would then privatize this £31 million debt and sell it as if it were a commodity, as shares in the South Sea Company, one share equaling £100 of debt. Those who had lent the government money could convert their IOUs into equivalent shares in the South Sea Company. The shares that were left over would be sold to the public. The price for one share would start at £100. As with any stock, the price could rise and fall, but in this case, if played right, the price would only go up. The South Sea Company had an intriguing name and held out the possibility that it would also begin trading in the vast wealth in South America. It was also the patriotic duty of English creditors to participate in the scheme, since they would be helping to cancel the debt while potentially making much more money than the annual interest payments the government paid them. If the share price rose, as it almost certainly would, buyers could cash out for a profit and the company could afford to pay nice dividends. Like magic, debt could be transformed into wealth. This would be the answer to all of the government's problems, and it would assure Blunt lasting fame. When King George first heard of Blunt's proposal in November of 1719, he was quite confused. He could not understand how such a negative debt could be instantly turned into a positive. Besides, this new jargon of finance went straight over his head. But Blunt spoke with such conviction that he found himself swept up in his enthusiasm. After all, he was promising to solve George's two greatest problems in one fell swoop, and it was hard to resist such a prospect. King George was massively unpopular, and one of the most unpopular English kings of all time. It was not totally his fault. He was not English by birth, but German. His title previously had been the Duke of Brunswick and Elector of Hanover. His title previously had, when Queen Anne of England died in 1714, George was her closest living Protestant relative. But the moment he ascended the throne, his subject found him not to their liking. He spoke English with a horrific accent, and his manners were so coarse, and he was always avid for more money. Despite his advanced age, he was constantly chasing after women other than his wife, none of whom were particularly attractive. In the first years of his reign there, in his first years of his reign, there were several coup attempts, and the public might have welcomed the change if they had succeeded. I don't have any water, good people. George desperately wanted to prove to his new subjects that he could be a great king in his own way. What he hated most of all was the crushing debts the government had incurred before he ascended the throne. George had an almost allergic reaction to any kind of debt, as if his own blood were being leached. Now here was Blunt offering him the chance to cancel the debt and bring prosperity to England, strengthening the monarchy in the process. It was almost too good to be true, and he threw his full weight behind the proposal. He assigned the Chancellor of the Exchequer, John Aislabie, the task of presenting the proposal to Parliament in January 1720. Parliament would have to approve it in the form of a bill. Almost immediately, Blunt's proposal stirred up a fierce opposition among several MPs, some of whom found it ludicrous. But in the weeks after Aislabie's speech, opponents of the bill watched in dismay as support for their side slowly withered away. Advanced shares in the venture had been virtually gifted to the wealthiest and most powerful Englishmen, including prominent members of Parliament who, sensing the sure profits they personally would gain, now gave their approval to the bill. When the bill passed in April of that year, King George himself showed up at the Southsea House and deposited £100,000 for shares in the new venture. He wanted to display his confidence in it, but such a step was hardly necessary. As the build-up to the bill's passage had captured the public and interest in the Southsea Company, shares had already reached a fever pitch. The center of activity was an area of London known as Exchange Alley, where almost all stocks were sold. Now the narrow streets in and around the alley were clogged with traffic growing thicker by the day. At first, it was mostly the wealthy and influential who came in their fancy coaches to buy shares. Among the buyers were also artists and intellectuals, including John Gay, Alexander Pope, and Jonathan Swift. Soon, Sir Isaac Newton felt the pull and invested a good chunk of his savings, £7,000. A few weeks later, however, he felt doubt. The price was rising, but what rises can surely fall. And so he cashed out, doubling his initial investment. Soon, rumors began to circulate that the company was about to initiate trade in South America, where all kinds of riches lay buried in the mountains. This only added fuel to the fire, and people from all classes began to converge on London to buy up shares in the South Sea Company. Blunt, it was reported, was a financial alchemist who had found the secret of transforming debt into wealth. In the countryside, farmers pulled up from under their beds their life savings in coins and sent their sons and nephews to buy as many shares as possible. The fever spread to women of all classes, who normally did not dabble in such things. Now actresses were rubbing elbows with duchesses in Exchange Alley. All the while, the price kept rising over £300, and soon £400. Like France before it. Now, like France before it, the country was now experiencing a spectacular boom. On May 28th, the king celebrated his 60th birthday, and for someone who had been known for his frugality, it was the most lavish party anyone had ever seen, with enormous tubs of claret and champagne. One woman at the party flaunted her new wealth by encrusting her dress with jewels worth over £5,000. Everywhere in London, the wealthy were tearing down mansions and replacing them with houses that were even larger and grander. Porters and footmen were now quitting their jobs and buying expensive coaches and hiring porters and footmen of their own. One young actress made such a fortune, she had to retire. She rented out an entire theater to say goodbye to her adoring fans. An aristocratic lady was astonished one evening at the opera to see that her former maid now occupied a more expensive box in the theater than her own. Jonathan Swift wrote in a letter to a friend, I have inquired of some that have come from London. What is the religion there? They tell me it is South Sea stock. What is the policy of England? The answer is the same. What is the trade? South Sea still. And what is the business? Nothing but South Sea. In the midst of this feverish buying and selling spree, there stood John Blunt at the pump, doing whatever he possibly could to stimulate the interest in South Sea shares and keep the price rising. He sold the stock in various subscriptions, offering generous terms of payment, sometimes requiring only a 20% advance to get in. For every £400 invested, Blunt would lend £300. He wanted to keep up the demand and make people feel that they might be missing out on their one chance for wealth. Soon the price had passed £500 and kept on rising. By June 15th, he had set the subscription price at an astronomical £1,000, with only 10% down to get in, and 10% installments spread over 4 years. Few could resist such terms. That very month, King George had Blunt knighted. Excuse me, good people, I have to drink. Oh, whoa. Excuse me, good people, I have to get some water. Oh, I'm back. I'm back. Wow. Wow. By June 15th, he had set the subscription price at an astronomical £1,000, with only 10% down to get in and 10% installments spread over 4 years. Few could resist such terms. That very month, George had Blunt knighted. Now a baronet, Sir John Blunt stood at the pinnacle of English society. Yes, he was rather unattractive to look at, and he could be quite pompous. But he had made so many people so wealthy that he was now England's most cherished celebrity. As the rich and powerful prepared to leave London for the summer months, the mood was downright giddy. Blunt affected a confident and carefree air, but underneath it, he was beginning to feel worried, even panicky. There were so many things he had failed to foresee. He had inadvertently inspired a rush of new speculative ventures, some involving legitimate ideas and some patently absurd, such as the development of a wheel of perpetual motion. People were now feeling the fever and were pouring some of their money into these new joint stock companies. Every £1 of cash that went into this was £1 less that people had to spend on the South Sea Company. And that was a growing problem, since there was only so much cash in England, and there were limits to how far he could go by offering credit. Similarly, people were beginning to pour their money into land as a safe investment for the future, often cashing out of their South Sea stock for such purposes. Blunt himself had been doing that very thing, unbeknownst to the public. More troubling still, the French had lost faith in the Mississippi venture and were pulling out their money. Cash had become scarce, and the French economy had now fallen into a sudden depression. This would certainly affect the mood in London. Before people returned for their summer holidays, Blunt had to take action. Working with Parliament, he got past the Bubble Act of 1720, which banned all joint stocks not authorized by royal charter. This would put an end to rampant speculation. But this solution created consequences he did not foresee. Thousands of people had poured their savings into these new businesses, and as these were now outlawed, they had no way of getting their money back. Their only recourse was to sell South Sea shares. Many of those who had used credit to buy South Sea shares saw themselves be facing installments they could no longer afford. They tried to cash out as well. The price of South Sea shares began to fall. That August, crowds were forming outside the South Sea House as people felt desperate to sell. Near the end of August, Blunt became desperate himself. He decided to launch his fourth money subscription, once again at £1,000. Now the terms were even more generous than ever, and on top of it, he was promising an astonishingly large Christmas dividend of 30%, to be followed by an annual dividend of 50%. Some were pulled back into the scheme by such alluring terms, including Sir Isaac Newton himself. But others, as if waking up from a dream, began to wonder about the whole thing. How would a company that had not traded for anything yet in South America, whose only tangible asset was the interest the government paid it on its debts, afford to dish out such large dividends? Now what had seemed like alchemy or magic appeared to be downright hoax on the public. By early September, the selling off had turned into panic, as almost everyone rushed to convert paper shares into something real. into coin or metal of any kind. As the panic for cash accelerated, the Bank of England was nearly brought down. It came close to running out of currency. It was now clear in England that the party was over. Many had lost their fortunes and life savings in the sudden downfall. Isaac Newton himself had lost some £20,000, and from then on, the mere mention of finance or banks would make him ill. People were trying to sell whatever they could. Soon there was a wave of suicides, including that of Charles Blount, Sir John's nephew, who slashed his throat after learning the exact nature of his losses. Blount himself was hounded in the streets and nearly killed by an assassin. He had to quickly escape London. He spent the rest of his life in the town of Bath, scraping by on the very modest means still left to him after Parliament seized almost all of the money he had earned through the South Sea scheme. Perhaps in his isolation, he could contemplate the irony of it all. He had indeed changed the course of history and assured his fame for all time as the man who had conjured up one of the most absurd and destructive schemes ever devised in the history of business. Thank you. Thank you for watching. If you watched live on Twitter, please leave a comment. Tell me what you think of it. The story. Tell me what you think of the video. If you have any advice of what I could do better, definitely next time I'll have water next to me. I'll make sure I have water so I don't leave mid-picture when I get parched. Anyway, I hope you learned something from the story of Mr. John Blount, Sir John Blount, should I say. And they say the best teachers is other people's experience. So take his experience and let it guide you so you don't make the same mistakes he did, or those people, or even Isaac Newton did. So adios, good people. I'll be making another video shortly. I'll be telling another story shortly. So I hope to see you then. Till then, like, comment, share, subscribe. Happy New Year. Good night. Good morning. Good evening.